In our presentation, my classmate and I are going to talk about the analysis of Stephen Crane's Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, under the naturalistic lenses. My part is going to include introduction, analysis of style and themes, which are double standards, poverty and alcoholism, hypocrisy, and fate versus free will. My classmate's part is going to include definition of naturalism and determinism in the novella, the power of social environment in Maggie, the influence of endemic poverty on the characters, and finally the conclusion. Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, a novella written by Stephen Crane in which it portrayed how the 19th century society was back then, how social divisions existed strongly, and how social dilemmas spreaded widely. The gap between the lower classes and the higher classes was a huge gap, and because of that, lower classes were suffering from poverty and from bad living conditions. They were trying to escape their reality and try to live and to get better and to live a decent life, but they couldn't find a chance because of the inequality spread back then. Stephen Crane tried to show that in his characters, and it was embodied strongly in the father's and the mother's character. They were abusing their children, they were making bad attitudes of aggressiveness and of carelessness toward their children because they thought that it was their way, it was the one way of escaping their reality and to forget that they were living a hard conditions in this unequal society. And by committing these violent and aggressive attitudes, children will be influenced by these bad behaviors. And Jimmy, Maggie's brother, was the one who was influenced badly by these attitudes. He became a careless person, a boy who wants to just fight in the streets and to express his feelings, to release his hate to inequality and to the bad conditions that they were living in. And the problematic that we are going to resolve through the analysis of the novella is what are the naturalistic elements in Maggie, A Girl of the Streets, and how are the characters affected by determinism, heredity, and fate. Now I'm going to move to the analysis of style and themes in the novella. Crane's utility of the naturalism theory manifested in relating it to Darwin's theory, in which an environmental surrounding or an environmental event is the one who is responsible for the life outcomes, is the one who is responsible for the reactions and the attitudes that the person make through this event and through this life experience. So the reaction made by the person is already determined and already decided by the environmental surroundings. Themes as victims and violence manifested clearly in this novel. When Maggie was forced to go to the prostitution path in order to gain money or in order to escape her reality of being abused by two alcoholic parents and to escape her bad family conditions. And the violence theme was embodied in the parents' characters. When they were abusing their children, they were considering violence as a way of life. And as seeing and witnessing this violent relationship between the parents and as growing in a stressed and bad conditions in the family, Jimmy was influenced by that. He became a violent and careless person, not finding a role model in his parents and adopting violence as a survival instinct and try to survive in a society that is full of aggressiveness. The double standards theme was mirrored clearly in the Maggie and Jimmy characters. Maggie and Jimmy are siblings, but the different thing is that Maggie is a girl and Jimmy is a boy. So Maggie's chances of finding a job were limited, in contrast to Jimmy, who makes his living as a truck driver. Maggie and Jimmy experienced the same experience of being in a relationship. She fell in love with Jimmy's friend, and rumors spread widely that she went to a prostitution path, and her reputation was affected badly. In contrast to Jimmy, who also went in a relationship with a girl who has the same conditions as Maggie, but he was not affected by the rumors were never made. All that because he was a boy. And by that, Crane shows that with the same experience, different results exist in the double standards. Poverty and alcoholism seem to go along together in this novella, in which the Johnson family were having a very bad conditions of poverty. So they were taking alcoholism as a way of escaping their reality and to cope with their harsh conditions. And as we said that poverty and alcoholism go hand in hand in this novella, it affected many of the decisions made by the characters, the children, Jimmy and Maggie. Maggie was forced to go to the prostitution in order to survive, and Jimmy became an alcohol consumer like his father. He grew up in a family full of aggressiveness and alcoholism, so resulting that he would become like his father, like his role model. But he didn't find that role model in his father. Stephen showed hypocrisy in the parents' reactions toward their daughter. When Maggie went to a prostitution, they were afraid that their reputation would be affected badly. When they are making a worse habits, they were aggressive and they were violent toward their children. It shows how hypocrite they are when making this contradiction, forgetting that the children needed a guide in their life, needed a role model to follow, and they were not able to differentiate between the right and the wrong thing to do. Fate versus free will. The idea of how inevitably fate is. Events happened in a specific period of time with specific lived conditions, whether they were good conditions or a bad conditions full of poverty and full of suffer. They are already determined by fate, and it is hard and even impossible to be changed. And in Maggie's characters, the free will doesn't really exist to change a certain situation from a childhood full of aggressiveness and violence and abusive parents to poverty that ruined the children's future and crushed their dreams and hopes of living a decent life with a good reputation.